Okay, so we are diving into the idea of SMS Quiet Hours. Texas just came out with some new rules. We're seeing that other states are kind of following suit. Can we just talk really quickly about like what they are to begin with? Like, what are they? And give us kind of a like. I don't completely understand. So explain it to me like I'm a new customer trying to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So quiet hours are really tied down to some compliance law around text messaging for businesses to ensure that they don't bother or disrupt customers in off hours. Off hours are typically considered um, before 8 a.m. and after 9 p.m. in the local time of those customers. So you really have to kind of manage two different things. Because if you're in one time zone and your customer base are in another, you have to be mindful of both ends. Particularly if you're going to send promotional based messaging or sales based offering. Those messages aren't held down by time constraints, so they shouldn't be in those off hours overall. Different states have different laws around it. Some kind of stays within the standard of the TCPA, which is the governing authority that has passed this particular laws. Other states will have their own version of it, like Texas, as well as California and Florida, where their hours varies a little bit. So essentially it's still starting at 8 a.m., but to 8 p.m. instead of the standard 9 p.m. In order to ensure that consumers are protected, there are some strict guidelines that businesses have to adhere to. Now, these are managed by the campaigns and SMS registrations. So I've done a whole series on what SMS registrations are, and we can kind of share the links later on what those are. But
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. So you said based on campaigns. So let's talk a little bit more about like what do you mean by that when you say that it's based on the type of campaign that they're running? Obviously, we've learned like you're not supposed to get text at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? Like that's a general guideline. But there are cases where maybe I want that text at 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, if I've called a plumbing company and I need them to come out and fix like an extreme urgency, I really want them to go ahead and text me at 2 o'clock in the morning if they're on their way out. Can they do that?
Yes. So campaigns in terms of messaging is essentially filtering what type of messaging is being sent. So you can have marketing-based messaging, you can have promotional, which is more tied to sales. You can have customer care and support messaging, or just kind of low usage messaging that a lot of businesses have, essentially allowing them to send messages to their customer base after their customer have opted in. So essentially, there's two things that you have to consider in terms of messaging compliance. You register your business, you register your campaign, and then depending on the campaign type that you have, it allows you to send messages based off of those hours. The adherence to the quiet hour is really ties to those promotional and marketing messaging. Everything else you can potentially send messages to your customer off hours. Like for example, if you have some kind of authentication and it expires within 10 minutes, the customer's trying to log in at 2 a.m., you're going to send that message within that first couple of minutes because they need to put in the code, right? So it really depends on those campaigns, and campaigns helps the industry regulates which type of messaging is being sent so that they can monitor and ensure that businesses are in compliance when communicating with their customers.
Okay. And so am I, as the customer, choosing the campaign type, or is that being determined based on the text and the context that they see me creating that messaging within?
It's based off of the businesses. So there's two, we're getting into the history of messaging, but there's two
I love
types.
it.
There's two types. There's P2P, which is person to person. So what you have with your cell phone, that's person to person communication. You can send that any hours of the day, right? And there's A2P, which is application to person. That's essentially the system that most businesses use to communicate with their customer. with that type of system, you have to go through the SMS registration. And that's where you determine as a business, am I sending messages to customer based off of customer support, care, depending on how many channels of communication you have? Or is this purely for lead generations, business development, marketing, right? So understanding that type of use case, and then you complete your registration, we as a business also help you fill out the information by asking the context of what your use case are when you're messaging your customers to determine what type of campaign you should register for. And the numbers that you have within your business to communicate to customers are tied to those campaigns. So for example, for most campaigns, you can have up to 49 different numbers tied to those campaigns. But if you as a business only register for a customer care type of campaign and you attempt to send marketing-based messages, it's not really going to allow you as much. There are several parameters like in our business that we keep in place to ensure that you don't do that as well. Whether it's do like feature management, we have like campaigns as well as blasts, as well as reminders. Those are features that are tied to pro and typically marketing-based campaigns versus just like customer care, where it's conversational, you're sending back and forth communication with your customers.
What if I want to do both? What if I need to be able to communicate? I mean, let's say the trifecta here. I want to be able to group message with my team members when they're out in the field. I also want to be able to send like customer like appointment reminders or communicate with them about an upcoming service visit, something like that. And I want to be able to send out my seasonal promotion or my, give them run a 10% off promotion or something like that throughout the year. What happens if I want to do all three?
You can do all three, absolutely. It's just purely based off of the campaigns that your business have registered for. So one of the things that campaigns, it ties to the phone number. So let's say you have 5 numbers that you want to communicate with just customer support, care, interactions. Those would essentially be tied to that type of campaign versus, marketing may have a list of numbers depending on if your business is nationally or local based, right, where you communicate with your customer. Those numbers would be tied to a marketing-based campaign. One thing to consider, though, because the system gives you access to either, it's kind of the onus on you as a business to manage those and configure it. So it really comes down to managing your customer data to ensure that you are maintaining that compliance, knowing a certain time frame that you're going to send those messages, what is considered for, like, if they're based in different time zones, that's managed on your CRM potentially, so you don't go out of adherence.
Okay, so it's on me. If I need to send out customer relationship messaging, I need to stick to those numbers. And if I'm going to send out a marketing-based message, I need to send out to that number. And that responsibility falls on me. If I send out my marketing message on my customer service number and I accidentally do that at 2:00 in the morning, I may have a potential problem because I violated quiet hours.
Yes,
Right?
potentially.
Okay.
So because businesses operate, in various locations, the onus is really on the individual business to manage their own compliance. We help you with the registration and ensure that we give you the best practices of how to manage your own compliance. But you want to ensure that you don't send those type of messaging to customers that didn't opt in to receiving them. Few things could happen. You can be fined by the FCC per message. It could be between 500 to 2,500 if they're not within the correct campaign and violating quiet hours. The carriers themselves, if they do audits and they see that you are not adhering to the campaign that you registered your business for, they can filter out your messages, which means that you're still paying for the messages that are being sent, but they will never be delivered.
Okay. So the carrier is going to restrict my message, and it's not going to go through. Is kind of what's happening in that situation. And so the carriers, can they detect when you've sent a marketing message through a customer service channel, or does that take an audit process for them to figure that out? How are they making that determination?
So they look at the campaigns that you have registered for your business and the number that it's sent. So that's one way that they audit. The other is, as a consumer, if you receive a message that you didn't consent to, you can report that to your carrier as spam. And that essentially can trigger an investigation process into whoever's potentially sending that message as a violator of whether it's quiet hours or opt-in consent.
Gotcha. So even that simple act of somebody receives my message and I reply to, like, I go to delete that and it says report as junk is the flag that's needed to then possibly get me in trouble if I've not done the right thing as a company trying to communicate with my customers.
Exactly. Obviously, sometime accident happens, and it won't necessarily be the first time that it happens where you get flagged, but we do advise that you adhere strictly to those policies to ensure that you don't have accidental, uh, carrier filtering or any fines that are associated to your messaging content.
I mean, I kind of love that because if I'm a company wanting to communicate authentically with my customers and I want to, I'm here to create relationships with them. So I'm not here to text them at 2 o'clock in the like I do appreciate that there are restrictions and regulations around that because I want to show my integrity as a company, right? So I think that that's great. I just what happens, give me a good like how to or best case if I want to send out a message, it's time specific, it's a little time specific, and it's marketing based. How do I need to do that? Say I need to send out 500 text messages. It's one of the bulk emails. I'm sending out my yearly promotion. How can I make sure that I'm not sending that out in the wrong time zone for someone somewhere within my list?
There's a couple of things that you could do. Managing your customer contact, so you can separate the contact list into maybe time zone based, depending on your type of business or the promotion that you're running. And then you can, of course, schedule the message at a later time that's convenient for the customer. We all know nobody's really wanting any promotional messages after certain hours. So knowing what the optimal time that your recipient is going to be reading those content would be a great time to schedule when those messages should be sent out or being delivered.
That's a great idea. Like, and scheduling makes it easy for me too, because maybe I can just do that at 8 o'clock in the morning and then not think about it after that. So what happens if my message is scheduled to go out and it runs into some sort of, I've hit my limit. I've hit a carrier limit or I am coming into quiet hours. How does pausing that work? Is that automatic? What's involved and what can I expect to pause versus to not pause in situations like that?
So there's a couple of things. If you're sending a blast, which is just a one message to a large group of individual, you can schedule that message. If it might have been an error and it's not the correct time you want to send it, you can reschedule it or delete the schedule message. Now, if you're sending a campaign has multiple segments within it. Let's say that it's a drip campaign, right? So if you schedule that and it was accidentally sent out initially, there's a couple things you could do. You can discontinue the future segments of that campaign, and then also checked within the system. The way that we have in our feature list is it does give you the ability to cancel those segments. And then we have another feature called the queuing. And what queuing does is it may not stop the message from being sent out in that initial hiccup, but it does queue the message where it looks at what kind of, based off the number that you have, what campaign is that number tied to? And then it checks your recipients to see what carriers that they have, what limits do those carriers have in terms of those type of campaigns, and it will send about 70% of the messaging. So it queues up to a point where it doesn't completely exceed the limits until the next time it recycles through, and then it'll send the rest of those messaging. So there's a couple of things you can consider. For the most part, if you're doing more of a marketing messages, It kind of stays within that like standard practice daytime hours. But obviously, when accidents happen, as long as the, one time or
as long as you're doing it by accident and not making a repeated habit of texting someone at 2 o'clock in the morning.
yeah.
Or 12 o'clock at night, or 9:30, just after the hours cut off. What are some of our, do you have any idea, like what are some of our most restrictive states? Are there states to highlight or different laws to kind of like call out, say these states have more regulations than others?
Florida,
Or at least right now?
yeah, I would say Florida and Texas are the two that has the most restrictive laws around text messaging your customer. And it's not just quiet hours. In terms of compliance in general, they make sure that you have double consent to send text messaging to your customer. They want to make sure that you specifically adhere to those type of like quiet hours. So their quiet hours 8 to 8 for the most part. The other two is there is a deposit as a business or bond essentially that you have to purchase a business if you're going to operate within specifically in Texas.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot. Are there ways, and I don't know if this would ever come into play or not, but are there ways that the customer can override those quiet hours or challenge them if they feel like they've got something that they really need to get out? Or is it like the rule's the rule? No urgencies or emergencies considered?
Emergency can always be bypassed, but those aren't ties to promotional and marketing based campaign, right? And I think in general, we understand that marketing based messaging, those are not emergencies. If your customer have businesses or engagement with you and you know that there's an outage of some kind, or if maybe there's fraud alerts or things like that, there is a time sensitive elements to it. So it makes sense to always bypass the kind of quiet hour adherence to communicate those changes to your customer to protect them essentially.
Okay. So say something as simple as like a company learns that somebody else fraudulently sent out a promotion that they're trying to act like is theirs. They're able to send out some kind of messaging that says that was not us that just communicated with you, and that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's tied to their SMS registration. So as a business, you know what type of customers you're going to support. Is this in general going to be sales driven, marketing driven, or is it really to support the service that they currently have with you? And in your consent or the opt-in that the customer needs to consent to, you can tailor it to, these are the type of messages you may receive from us at various hours, depending on, what the services you have. So you can tailor your customer experience and when you communicate to them based off of those.
And I think that all comes down to authentic customer interaction, right? If I'm authentically communicating with my customers and I'm doing the right thing, I'm in good shape. I'm going to do my best to adhere to the quiet hours, to everything that I have set up and set into place, messaging from the right phone numbers and things like that, to make sure that I'm doing right by my customers because I value them. And the time that it comes into play, this is a great conversation and example of why these laws are here to actually help protect customers, yes, but also protect the integrity of my business and other people's businesses, to ensure that there isn't fraudulent practice or misconception going on, and we are protecting consumers. So I think that all in all, the addition of those hours is really set up to help me, if I can, if I'm looking at it that way, to make sure that like it differentiates me, an authentic business, from others who may be more bad actors in this scene, right? That's all we're doing, is dividing that authenticity.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's important to differentiate between, what your business mission or operation is versus what you're trying to accomplish too. Because the customer value loyalty and transparency with their communication. But if you're bothering them at, whether it's time where they're spending with their family or, off hours that's not typically tailored for businesses, you can get a bad rep for that, and they can block your number from communicating in the future, which essentially means you've lost another channel of communicating to your customer. And it may be legitimate messaging at the time, but if they don't want to hear from you during those time, they can opt out completely, and then you won't be able to communicate with them altogether.
Yeah.
Never
So
mind the compliance behind it.
right. Don't abuse the privilege of having a relationship with your customer, and then you'll keep them. But if you do abuse that and you do try to, I think there was a point in time years ago where the tactic was, let's call everyone around dinner because we know that they're going to be home. And the truth of the matter is that time has passed, and we don't do that anymore because it's not very nice. Right. So I think that there's that element of it, and this is really these laws that are being put out and put into place are some of those same suggestions. It's not very much different from not calling people during those hours. There's a politeness that we're putting into play here that it sounds like is a great way to determine if you've got a great customer relationship and relationship with that company or not. How about alerts? Do we need to know anything? Like, I sent out my message, be it good, bad, or otherwise, and it was on my marketing phone number. Will I get an alert from my carrier or from one of the regulatory bodies that tells me that I violated that rule? Do I get a warning? Does anything happen before I get the fines per message and those sorts of things?
Typically, no. And you never know when that can happen. So it's important to be vigilant to ensure that you are following the law, ensuring that you're protecting your customer and adhering to those parameters, quiet hours, making sure that whatever you're sending to your customer is in a kind of socially acceptable time. Because you never know when you might get fined. It can come out of nowhere or potentially nowhere to you, but it can irate a customer. You could lose the customer if they receive a message outside of the normal hours that they didn't consent to. So I think it's important to value those relationships to ensure that you can still send marketing-based messages, just keep it within the daytime hour.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, even if I don't get caught, right? And even if I don't get caught doing it, what I'm doing along the way is just dropping customers one by one as they get fed up with me. So it makes sense to just comply, but it is helpful to know that if I've done something wrong accidentally or on purpose, I may not always know that that's happened because those regulatory bodies, it's like video traffic cameras. You may not know when someone's watching. But so that's great to know. And do you know if we have, say I sent it out by accident and I did get flagged and I am getting in trouble, can I appeal? Can I say, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. See, it's just this one time. Is there leniency in that sort of effort, or is this very contractual? You've broken the rules, you're done.
The law is very clear. There is a dispute process where you can submit information to try to rebuttal, but ultimately it's up to the authority to investigate and determine if, because regardless whether, so I think initially I said the fines is between 500 to 2,500. If it was found intentional, you get the maximum fine. It's 2,500, but unintentional can be 500. So regardless, if you get fined, you'll pay the fee, but the fee amount may vary depending on what the findings are.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I mean, I think that makes sense. So really, best practices when we're talking about sending out marketing and promotional texts is keep it within daytime hours for all areas of the country, for all areas that you're sending to. Keep all the time zones in mind and just make sure that you're on the up and up and playing it safe. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my recommendation is really, especially since this law is within the United States, sending like promotion-based messaging, use the schedule message feature and look at the time zone that kind of overlaps daytime hours for all the different time zones within the United States, right? Typically noon is probably a good time for Pacific time, because then it kind of overlaps all the different time zone and there's no gap in between where you might be touching on one time zone that are outside of the normal operating hours.
I think that makes good sense. That's strong sense. And again, if I'm that plumber who needs to respond to an emergency call at 2 o'clock in the morning, sounds like I can do that. I just do that through my customer service line. And I don't do that through the line that I have registered as a marketing and promotional campaign line. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I have, like, just out of curiosity, I'm new, I'm just starting out, I'm a small business. I just want to be able to text from my main number. So what do I need to know if I just want to text from my main number? Do I need to treat that main number like, if I want any kind of marketing promotion to go out to that number, I need to treat that line as a marketing promotion line and just keep all of my messaging within quiet hours, even if I'm the plumber at 2 a.m.? What do I need to do in that situation? Do I need to go into it thinking I need 2 lines? Talk me through that process.
Yeah, I would say it really depends. And one of the things that VirtualPBX does really well is we meet with our customer that are interested in text messaging. We walk them through the registration. We get their use case to ensure that the registration that they're applying for match their use case, so that whatever campaigns they do end up doing, it's purely based off of their business operations. And then we kind of coach them through, what does that look like? What's the guidance? Here's the parameters you want to stay within. So we help train them up so that when they do have access or get approved for text messaging, they know the base of how to communicate with their customer, how to ensure that they're maintaining compliance within the laws for text messaging.
That makes sense. And I mean, that is the benefit of us at VirtualPBX, right? Like, because you're talking to people when you set something up, those people can also have that conversation with you, talk that through with you. It's not something that you're entering, a multiple choice answer. We're actually talking it through, which helps tremendously, especially if I'm the guy that I'm like, I don't know yet what I want to do with it. I just know that people are texting. Everyone's talking about the fact that people prefer texting, and I need to be able to text because people are preferring that line of communication, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And even for businesses that are kind of on the fence, they're not sure if they want to text their customer, we do have text forward, which is a feature where you can enable to receive text messaging to see if your customers are texting you. And that's kind of a good entry to see, okay, is this a good channel for me to enable to start communicating with my customer? Because I'm already receiving those messages. I haven't been able to send them yet because I didn't complete the registration. But it's a good way to dip your toes into the water to see what level of engagement you have, and then commit fully once you know that there's a certain level of engagement.
That makes sense. Okay, I thought of a couple other questions. Let's see if I can actually remember them now that okay, you had mentioned earlier setting up campaigns, like a drip campaign, where you're basically, for those who may not be as familiar with a drip campaign, you're sending out a message. You're asking that customer to engage with you, send back a Y or an N, send back a time, whatever you choose for that kind of keyword response to be. You're setting that up to have a two-way conversation. What happens? So that's all automated, which is great for your business, a little bit more hands-off, which is super helpful for giving some small businesses their time back for a little bit. What happens if they respond to you outside of quiet hours, which then is going to trigger your next message to come outside of quiet hours? I know that's a really big detail, but how does that work? Is that okay?
Are, in this scenario, the customer responding to a message that you've sent, or they're simply texting you and they're looking for a response in return? Because it would depend. If they're seeking support and they're engaging initially, it's acceptable to reply and to answer their question and stick within those parameters. If it's a drip campaign and you're sending it, let's say by accident, outside of those hours, and they respond to it, typically in the drip campaign itself, you can actually set up the segment. So if there's a response, you don't actually, like the customer doesn't have any further message like it discontinue the drips essentially. Unless you keyed in. So typically a lot of what business will do too is they'll create some keywords that have an auto reply. So if you send a message with that specific keyword, it's going to trigger a auto message sent to the customer. Those aren't considered promotional based or marketing messages. It's simply, it could be a keyword like help, right? If the customer is sending that, they're seeking help. So it could be an auto message like, if you need our support, you can give us a call, you can reply with this set of keywords so that we know that you need this or escalate it. So depending on how you triage and set up your engagement initially with your customer, and then communicate that either through your different channel, like potentially emails listed on your website, so the customer know what the role and engagements are.
Okay, so here's my scenario. All right, I'm putting you on the spot. Okay, so I've had a great relationship with a customer. They've engaged in my service. I want to say thank you to them. So I've set up an automatic response to go out to them that says, hey, thanks so much. Great service today. I want to give you 10% off on your next service. That thank you is set out to, and maybe it has a reply with yay for a great service if you want 10% off. I don't know. Reply with something for a great 10% off. So that message is set out to go out within the not during quiet hours, during regular business hours. So that thank you message goes out. But my customer works second shift. They get off work at 10 o'clock. They reply to my text message and say, yay, at 10 o'clock at night, when it's technically quiet hours. They've engaged me. They've asked for my coupon code, which is what I'm going to send next. And that's going to automatically go out because they've responded. Am I okay?
For the most part, it's a little bit of a gray area. Because technically, it's still part of a campaign potentially. But because the customer engaged with you and they're expecting a response, it still kind of, that's why it kind of falls in that gray area where you're not necessarily straying away from the compliance of messaging, but because of the category that that message falls under, it can technically be out of compliance. But in that scenario, the customer's not going to report you as a spam message or sales message potentially to the carriers, right? They actually want the content that you're sending them.
That makes sense. And I have asked, I have said, reply if you want this code. So I'm going to try to be in the clear, but that's great to clarify what happens when some of those campaigns drift over into quiet hours. I had another question and now I can't remember what it is. So we'll see if I can figure that out. But are there other things that I should know about, thinking from the standpoint of, I am a new business, I am adding text messaging, just because I know and I hear that people are wanting to communicate that way. Anything else that I need to think about or consider when I'm trying to get into this, and not wanting to violate quiet hours?
I mean, quiet hours is really just one segment of compliance within text messaging, right? So that's specifically for promotional and sales messaging. But in terms of communicating with your customer, the big thing is really about consent, right? As long as you have your customer consent to send them messaging and you've done your due diligence to ensure that, if you're going to engage with them separate from customer care engagement or support, where it's more like sales driven, you have double consent versus just a single consent where you can do keyword, which is essentially the initial message that gets sent to the customer can be an opt-in, reply with start or confirm or whatever the keyword is to opt into receiving messaging from us. While marketing-based messaging, typically you have some kind of form, like a lead gen form that you're collecting information where they have to check the box to consent to receive messaging. And then you also enable a secondary, whether it's a keyword opt-in, to ensure that when you do actually send out those messaging campaign, it still sent them that message initially. So they can still have, they have the option to, even though they've previously opted in, they can still opt out once they've received that first message. So you want to leave that option open and understanding what opt-in means for your customer and ensuring that you're managing those details for the customer is really crucial for any business that are planning on communicating with their customer through text messaging.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so the nice thing, again, if I'm coming to Virtual PBX, I'm asking for help with text messaging, I kind of get a nice hand-holding experience where somebody's walking me through, making sure I understand all of this as I get started. I think that gives me some peace of mind if I'm a small business jumping into all of this, because it really is. I mean, we say that $500 per text is a smaller fine if you didn't do it on purpose, but that's still quite a bit. And as a small business, I need to keep that in mind. And I wouldn't want to necessarily roll into it without somebody guiding me along to make sure and I think text forward's a great point, taking a look at, okay, who's texting me right now? And I think that gives me my first dip into traversing the landscape of of texting in general. It really is. We're seeing, and I know Lynn, you can attest to this. Like, we're seeing more and more people want to communicate through text message. It's just as the generations that are functioning with these and working with these businesses are getting younger, that's just a common channel. It makes things easier. A lot of people don't want to jump on the phone, don't have time to jump on the phone sometimes. And so text messaging is a pretty great way. Anything from a group message to, again, those guys out in the field to just send a quick message that an inspector is running late or something is happening with their team, all the way down to promotional and marketing messages. It has become a very mainstream, very expected channel for communication.
Yes, and it's a short burst communication that's more real time for the most part too. So it makes a lot of sense when you're trying to get quick engagement from your customer and it's on the go, right? A lot of time, or majority of the time, customers have their mobile number or mobile phone with them, so they can receive that in real time. And it has more of an immediate response for the most part. So it is a great channel to get into, but there's definitely some clear compliance behind it to ensure that, as a business, you're protected, but as a consumer, you're also protected from getting unwanted messaging as well. So it's just important to kind of adhere and understand both sides of the equation as you're communicating with your customers.
Yeah, think of it as a comprehensive channel, just like you would with email or phone calls, and not just your straight up marketing channel. Like, it's comprehensive communication, and thoughtfulness and integrity and authenticity all go into that so that you can ideally maintain all of your customer relationships, and in fact enhance them. Because a lot of people, I mean, I am that busy person in the car all the time, and I really depend on a reminder to say that I need to be somewhere sometimes. Or I mean, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of balls in the air a lot of times, and text messaging is fantastic for me. But I get just as, I want to maintain that relationship with that company, that business that I'm working with. And I can think of them really highly, and, hey man, thanks for reminding me so that I make it somewhere on time. I have a great opportunity to establish loyalty with that company as long as they're engaging me appropriately.
Yeah, exactly. And one of my favorite features is always the reminder feature. And you can schedule that message, and it really adds that personal aspect to it, right? If you're engaging with a new customer, maybe there's, depending on what kind of business you are, you want to remember certain details about that customer. You can schedule a happy birthday message. Something as simple as that makes you so thoughtful as a business to that individual consumer. So think about like those little details that are so simple but yet so impactful.
100%. And I know, like, I'm a sucker for all of those. I love it when somebody remembers those things. My birthday, my anniversary, that's all really appreciated and makes me feel like I have a relationship with them. Okay, can we dive in for 1 second? I know we're kind of where we're at on time, but I want to dive in 1 second to one more thing. So something that I appreciate that we have as well is those reminders. When you send them out, they can come from your main business number. So sometimes I get reminders or not even reminders, the happy anniversary, whatever that is coming through, and I don't have any idea where that came from. So I think that just brings up a really good point here, because we talked about different numbers earlier and how you're using texting, making sure that you have a customer service number. If you're truly communicating a lot of customer service with those customers, making sure that you have a marketing number. Do you have any advice or any thoughts on just how you use numbers, or something to think about? If I'm a small business, and I know that I'm growing, I know that I want to grow, what should I be thinking about when it comes to how and like what campaigns I'm putting on what numbers?
I mean, it really depends on your business use case. But one thing that we do have is custom signature. So, it can be difficult to determine uh, the phone number. Like if the customer don't have it saved in their contact, they may not know who's messaging them. But if you add a little custom signature below that's specifically tied to your business, that's a good way for them to identify where the message content is coming from or who it's coming from. Right? And that's one easy way to determine that. The other kind of best practice too is your main business number, whether it's a local based number or a toll free. Typically, that's a number that's recognized by your brand. So because we're also a phone provider, you can put in your caller ID. So for the most part, depending on the carriers of the individual, it will show up as your business, whether you're calling them. Text message is a little bit different, but that's another way that you can kind of like key in to know about your individual business.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that is a great feature, because and I agree, the signature, that's a great idea. Really should let some of the people that I get text messages from we should let them know that that's a possibility. But that helps a lot, because a lot of times I think we kind of forget to say, oh, by the way, this is so and so. But that means that maybe my customer service number that I'm using, maybe those signatures, it sounds like, could come from Jay in customer service, or whoever, I have control over what that signature says to make it personal. And then if my main business number, if I am using business phone service and it's coming up on the caller ID, then they know that. And I kind of have an idea of how to structure those phone numbers going forward. So I guess that's my takeaway a little bit. If I'm a small business, is if you think you may want customer service down the line, that's a good thing to also kind of think about in your business plan, right? I have my main number, I have a customer service number, and ways to reach out in different fashions from those numbers.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, well, thank you for letting me take up your time and asking you a million questions about virtual text and text messaging. I'm not saying I won't have more, but I realized we didn't do introductions. This is Lynn England, the Chief Product Officer for VirtualPBX, and I am Abby Moore. I am in marketing with VirtualPBX, and we're just here to chat a little bit about SMS and virtual text. Anything else we should add?
Yeah, I'm absolutely always interested in different topics around text messaging or our products in general. So, and I've run a few webinar series on this various topics, and always love to refresh on those topics. So if any customer have any questions or anything that comes up, I'll typically do a new series to kind of cover those details.
That's a really great point. Lynn is a wealth of information, everyone. So if you are taking a look at this and saying, I have 500 more questions related to text messaging, all you have to do is let us know, and we will absolutely either make something like this that we can share out with everyone, because knowledge just raises all boats, or we can certainly answer questions individually, because that's what we're here for, just to really help everyone out there communicate better, but communicate in a way that is comfortable for them too, and making sure that we're not taking away all the goodness that makes small businesses as amazing and impressive as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Fair?
mean, small business is the backbone of America, essentially. And text messaging is a great way for them to really bridge the gap of, sometime resource where you can message numerous customer and engage with them in real time versus if you're on a, one call potentially. So it really is a good way to bridge the gap as a growing business when you're starting out and to kind of continue that level of communication with your customer base.
Yeah, if you didn't know anything about VirtualPBX before seeing this today, know that we are the small business advocates. We are basically trying to find every way possible to both maximize your ability to communicate efficiently and clearly and reliably, and also and just enhance and elevate small businesses to kind of give them a level playing field with everyone else out there. We are the cheerleaders that are making that happen every way that we can think of. So if you have small business questions, whether they're about virtual text, whether they're about business text messaging or quiet hours or something else entirely, we can absolutely have the conversation about them. And I'm sure Lynn loves having her brain picked. I can attest to this because I do it often. All right. Well, thank you. Lynn, anything else? I think we're good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the conversation.
All right. I'll see.